We used to think we were gods, until we found out we weren't. Isn't that a story worth telling?
Byron Merritt is the grandson of science fiction legend Frank Herbert. As executive producer of the modern DUNE movie franchise, he oversees the legacy of his grandfather's work, a task to maintain and cultivate what has become one of the most popular science fiction franchises ever created.
There's no saving this place anymore.
DUNE, the novel, which originally was passed on by over 20 potential publishers, became a science fiction juggernaut. As the best-selling science fiction novel of all time, DUNE is a spectacle. Incredibly detailed and thought out by Herbert, played out over the grand tapestry of a race that had mastered interstellar travel and populated the galaxy.
It's breathtaking. When you see sand here, imagine water. If you dive in, you can't reach the bottom.
You dive in?
Yes, it's called swimming.
I don't believe you.
With famed Sicario director Denis Villeneuve at the helm, the future of the DUNE franchise looks unstoppable as it inhabits the current spot as the biggest movie on the planet, right now, at this moment.
The end of House Atreides.
Your father didn't believe in revenge.
What if Paul Atreides were still alive?
Have you ever had a dream about your first ride?
Don't try to impress anyone. You're brave, we all know that. Be simple. Be direct. Nothing fancy.
I understand. Nothing fancy.
You will never lose me, Paul Atreides.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Please welcome and give a hearty applause for DUNE executive producer Byron Merritt as we welcome him to the 2024 Carmel International Film Festival.
How is it just navigating the contracts and the scripts and all the details and getting these huge movies made?
See all this gray hair? That's what it's for. That and having twins. I met Ken, who's a friend of Ken. Where are you? There he is, Ken Jones. Good friend of mine who lives here in Pacific Grove. And he, as we met each other as I came in, he said, "Boy, I sure am glad you got this all done finally. How long has it been?" And I said, 25 years it took to get this done. And that was because it went from Paramount Pictures to Legendary. Paramount kind of got the ball first, didn't do anything with it, and then Legendary took it over. And it took probably a good 6 years of contract negotiation, getting the actors on board, getting Hans Zimmer to score it, and Denis was on board. Obviously, he was the number one person. He's been a DUNE fan since he was 15 years old.
Yeah, I can imagine he really wanted to do this, and the Dune fans must have been behind seeing another iteration of the series, because the first one was incredible. I really enjoyed it. I loved Sting in there. I loved it all. I saw way past its presumed faults, but Denis Villeneuve is an incredible director. What was it like working with him?
He is the most humble guy, just a downright, down-to-earth guy. I met him in New York this year, and we sat and talked for a while. He's a Dune geek. And John Spates, who was co-author of the script, I met him in Seattle back in 2017, I think, when they were doing the first Dune film. And he said things to me about the Bene Gesserit that I'd forgotten about. And he was just such a big Dune geek like Denis is, that having these two work together became just, you see what we got. Just an amazing film.
It looks phenomenal. Annette, what do you have to say here?
I'm just in awe. I imagine the fan base for not only the novel, but this project and Dune 1. I can't even imagine how many people you have touched with this work. So the 25 years it took you to get to this point, we are all very appreciative of your vision and not giving up.
Thank you.
Are you planning on doing anything for fans at Comic-Con this year? Is that
I used to do Comic-Con, and it's exhausting to do Comic-Con. And this year it would probably be even 300-fold worse to go there and do a Dune thing. I know Legendary will probably present something there. But I don't have any plans to go there this year. I used to do it, it was fun. This was before Dune 1 even took off, so it's been probably 15 years since I've been to Comic-Con. But Comic-Con's fun, don't get me wrong. If you get a chance to go to Comic-Con, I don't care how old you are, you become a kid again at Comic-Con. So I would recommend going if you get a chance. It's usually held in San Diego.
Yes.
And it's a huge event center down there. And it's a lot of fun. It's just for those who present and have a booth. It's so much work. So much work. And it's exhausting. So, but it's fun too.
Annette worked for The Simpsons, and so she would run interference for Matt Groening, the creator, at Comic-Con sometimes.
I can't even imagine.
I designed a booth for Bongo Comics that I think they used for almost 25 years.
Yeah, I still have a booth. I still have it.
Exhausting is the word.
Where's it set up, in your garage?
No, I have a
Can we come visit it?
Yeah, really. I haven't got it in a holding cell somewhere. I'll have to look. It's probably got dust all over it.
Yeah. David Diaz, are you up there? Okay, the projectionist and manager of the theater is a huge Dune fan, so I figured I'd give him one of the first audience questions. But he's not there. Does anybody have a question for Byron?
Hi.
Hello.
I did see Dune 1. I was extremely reluctant to do so after seeing the 1984 version. It's very funny.
Lawrence, are you hearing this? What the heck?
The acting itself was great, and the production itself was absolutely amazing. It was on point. The reason I was mainly reluctant was because there was such a contrast between 1984's designs with the characters, with the props, with the locations, and I looked at Dune 1 and it was much more like imperialistic, sort of, reminded me of like communism, literally. And so I just wanted to know if there was what was the purpose for such a contrast in the design, and was there ever like a clash while producing this film in terms of how you wanted to go about the execution of creating the film?
Yeah, I think Stephen Waldman, who's up here, mentioned Patrice Burnett, who did the production design. He's an amazing man. If you give it a chance to meet him, he's also extremely humble. I've had a chance to meet and talk to him briefly. I don't think there was any problems with how we did the production, and I would say that. What was the second part of your question? I can't remember.
What was you know, why did we want to do like a more imperialistic sort of, you know, imperialistic design?
Well, that's kind of the way my grandfather wrote it, right? There's dukes in this world, there's emperors. It's very almost Nazi Germany as in some cases if you look at how they run things. So there's just planets and you're granted a dukedom or an earldom of a planet, right? So it's definitely got that imperial feel to it. And I think Denis, the director, and John Space did an amazing job as well as a Legendary, who just kind of let him go, right? They didn't interfere with him at all.
How did you make the transition from being a nurse to getting in the film industry? And what jobs did you hold working your way up to where you are now?
All right, great question. So I started out as a lowly EMT on an ambulance, worked as a paramedic with a guy who called me today, Darren. I don't know if you're here today, but Darren Lavecchio is a good friend of mine, and he's a member of the Carmel Film Festival group. And I worked as a paramedic there. My grandfather had written Dune, I don't know how many of you know this, back in 1965, right? That's how old this book is. And it is more relevant probably today than it was in 1965. It helped launch the environmental movement of today's world. And so I was working an ambulance, knew who my grandfather was, spent summers with him. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Dune, big deal. You know, went up and spent summers with him. And then the Dune movie came out in 1984 with Sting. And everybody was like, ooh, it's going to do great, it's going to be phenomenal. Well, I didn't do that great. Right, it tanked a little bit. And then when my grandfather passed away in 1986, my mother and her brother took over overseeing my grandfather's legacy. And then my mother passed away, I took on the mantle and now help run what's called Herbert Properties LLC, which oversees all of my grandfather's work. And that's how I got from A to B at this point.
Great, interesting. Next question here.
Hi, so I just wanted to, this is kind of a personal question, but it's like I'm an aspiring filmmaker, and last summer I tried directing my first feature film, but it was just me. You know, I was producing it, I wrote it, I was just doing all this stuff, and I ended up postponing it. But I just felt so overwhelmed and like just not confident.
I'm not surprised, man. That's a lot of work.
And so I'm trying to make this short film, and I'm feeling the same thing. Like, you know, I'm not feeling confident in myself. So I just wanted to know, like, because Dune is such a big movie. Like, did you ever feel like overwhelmed just by all this stuff? And if so, like, how did you overcome that?
I never felt overwhelmed. I think because we had a lot of people that were backing us, that really wanted us to succeed. And I think that's important. If you're going to do a movie, you got to have good people on board, and not just yourself, right? If you try to do everything yourself, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to end up looking gray like me. Right? So, and then I was joking about that earlier, but I mean, really want to get out there and get to know people, and hopefully you can do that through Carmel International Film Festival. It's probably going to surprise a lot of people. How many people have seen the Dune Part 2? How many people have seen it? Okay. When Paul and Chani are sand walking across the desert together, that got me. That was huge. Yeah, that was the moment I thought, oh my God, my grandfather's books made it.
Yeah, that was a fantastic scene. But my silly question is that, have you seen the Muppets? Like, have you seen anything Muppet-related?
There have been some, like, spoofs on Dune out there, and they've made some Muppet spoofs on Dune. If you get a chance to, you can YouTube, Google it.
But my question is that, who would you fan cast as the characters in Dune, Muppet characters as Dune characters?
Well, I think Kermit would have to be Paul, obviously. That goes without saying.
May my knife shatter.
And Miss Piggy's got to be Chani, right? It's just gonna be. And I think, I'm not sure who Fozzie would be. I don't know, he's kind of furry, so I don't know if there's any furry character. Most people are bald in Dune, you know? I don't know. So, that'd be a tough one.
Sam the Eagle could be Duncan.
There you go. That's true.
All right, thank you.
I know you had wrote an article in about 2001 about the difference between the Dune movie and the Dune miniseries. What's your take on that now that there's 2 movies released on top of that?
Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Well, the 84 film, it was okay, right? I think it was, the production design was beautiful. I think the actors were good. It was very stilted script, though. They tried to put too much into a 2-hour film, I think. And that's where Denis, I think, got it right. He says, I'm not doing this if I can't break it up into at least 2 movies.
Yeah, and I know they spent a lot of time on the worms, correct?
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, 3 months, I think, work alone just on the worms and getting the actors to do the worm pieces. Yeah. So yeah, that took forever. And then the Dune miniseries, it kind of suffered the opposite, right? It had all of most of the books in it because it was a miniseries, but the production design was lacking, and it had hats that looked like they were in butterflies ready to fly off people's heads, right? So I will say that this kind of blows everybody out of the water in terms of what's come before.
I want your opinion, and if you know your grandfather's opinion, but what did you think about Jodorowsky's vision of the Dune?
All right, for those
greatest movie never made.
Yeah, the greatest movie never made. There was actually a documentary made on it called Jodorowsky's Dune, the greatest Dune film never made. I think it would have been a nightmare. Number one, if you look, I think the casting would have been interesting. I heard he wanted to have Mick Jagger in it, and Orson Welles, and Salvador Dali was going to be the Emperor.
Another Monterey resident.
Yeah, and so, but he said he never read Dune. He just got a screenplay idea based off of it and just created this crazy script. The great thing about it was H.R. Geiger, who developed a lot of the images for it, that went on to be held with in the Alien franchise. So Alien and Aliens, a lot of the images you see in there are from Jodorowsky's ideas.
I just wanted to, it's not really a question, but I wanted to congratulate and just my opinion of the differences between the looks and the vibes of the different Dunes. Your grandfather wrote a great book. It was really descriptive. And if you read the narration, you would, in my mind, you come up with Denis and Patrice's vision. And it becomes simple that way. The helicopter dragonflies, spot on.
Thank you. Well, you know, like I said earlier, the fact that Dune was written since 1965 is almost unbelievable. And then you look at what it's doing today, I think my grandfather would be incredibly proud to see how many people are getting impacted by this story still.
With 25 years of working on the film and with the book being so iconic, did the movies come out the way you hoped for? Did they feel, I guess, very like traditional to the books and like very just iconic?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you look at the David Lynch film, they did a lot of internal monologue and put that on screen, right? Which there was a lot of that in my grandfather's book as well. And it felt a little stilted. Denis doesn't do that at all, right? He does it all via imagery. You have to gather that information yourself. He doesn't spoon feed you anything. And that's probably the most interesting thing about my grandfather's book and these two movies, is that they do the same thing. You literally, the first time you read Dune, you miss a lot, right? You're like, wait a minute, was this about environmentalism, politics? What was it about? You know, well, yeah, it was about that and a lot more, right? Same thing, if you go back and watch Dune and Dune 2, Dune Part 2 again a second time, you'll pick up a lot of the things you missed the first time. And it is a lot. I'm very happy with Dune and Dune Part 2. I think they're incredible movie making that's probably going to live as a testament to movie making of all time, I think.
So this question is going to be really silly. I just rewatched...
Kermit the Frog.
No, it's not even funny either. So my question, we saw the complicated process of people getting onto the worms, and as I watched the movies, I'm like, okay, so how did they get off?
You are not the only one. Right? And that is going to be shown in the next movie. Okay? So put your seatbelt on. And
I look forward to it.
If you've read the book, you know already, right? You know how they get off the worm. But that wasn't a necessary thing they needed to film here, right? It just wasn't something that was going to be required. Plus, it takes a long time for it to happen. So, yeah, that's why they didn't film it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So earlier you mentioned that when your mom passed away, sorry for your loss, that you fell into your grandfather's property, right, with the book. What inspired you? You said you worked for 25 years to get these 2 Dune films made. What inspired you to remake that David Lynch film?
It wasn't really an inspiration to remake the films. It was more getting the right people talking about it and getting them together and deciding that, yeah, we can make it, and I think we can do it better. We can do it better. When Denis approached us and said, I want to do this movie, and then Legendary came on board and said, we're going to help finance this movie. And we said, okay, well, let's see the script, and we got to see the script, and we're like, whoa, okay, yeah, let's go, right? We kind of just gave Denny the reins and gave him a few tweaking points to work on to make sure he stayed true to the Dune canon, and then just let him go, right? Because you don't interfere with a genius's work, and Denis is a genius. He really is.
Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, let me get this, pardon me. That's okay, Rose. There you go.
New Dune fan, part 2, like, blew me away. I've seen it 4 times now.
All right, thank you.
I thought
contributing to my retirement.
Honestly, I want to see it again. I thought the Gidi Prime scenes were phenomenal.
Infrared filming.
Just part of the reason why it's so rewatchable is some of those shots. But any stories to tell about that decision making in infrared and how that came about?
Well, Greg Fraser, who's the DP on the film, director of photography, did all the cinematography, all the work on the camera work. He and Denis had a long conversation about how do we want to film Gidi Prime. And they said, well, it's kind of a world without color. That's kind of the way they kept describing it to each other. And then they said, well, how do we film that? And so they did a couple of tests, and they finally came up with the infrared camera. And that was all for all the exterior shots. And it just white and blacked out everything. That's all you got. And they actually had fireworks go off, and it like inverted the colors of the fireworks, which really was fascinating. But yeah, that's basically how that came about on Gidi Prime. I thought that was genius, really.
So I was just curious, because you mentioned earlier the use of practical effects in the movie. Just like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer practical over CGI? Yeah?
Yes. And the reason is it literally puts the actors on that set, and they feel like they're part. They're not behind a green screen, in front of a green screen, and they really feel like, oh my God, we're part of this movie. You talk to any of the people. I got to meet Josh Brolin at the New York premiere, and he said these sets were just phenomenal, just incredible. He said, I felt I could act because I was there. And I think that shows.
That's cool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. So I wanted to say this before, but I watched Dune 2, like, I've seen it 2 times already, and like, wow, man, like, I watched part one, and I'm kind of critical of part one because, like, I love it, but it's also like, well, there's some stuff. But then part two happened, and I'm like, yeah, I'm into this universe. I'm into everything. And I want to say thank you to your grandfather, Denise, and everyone, like, for making, like, such an incredible film, honestly. And it's my favorite film of the year, hopefully. A lot of other films coming out. But my question is, when locating, like, on location stuff, because there's a lot of deserts in the world, what made you, like, narrow down, like, that one specific desert going, like, yeah, this is the desert that we need for Arrakis?
So those are the other producers in the film who actually go out and scout locations, right? You get location scouts who go out and find these locations, like they get a copy of the script, or they get a copy of the portion of the script that they need to be focused on. Say, go find me these sets. And so they send them out. Went to Abu Dhabi, all right, and which is by a beautiful desert, huge desert there. A lot of the sets, the practical sets, were built on a huge stage. I think it's called the Sagio Studios in Budapest. And it's got some of the largest studios in the world there. They're like aircraft hangars, those size, and that's where they built a lot of these sets. And I think that helped this thing just become just the monstrosity that it is.
All right, thank you. Also, my jacket is Arrakis colored.
All right. I did want to say, you're not the only one who had trouble with the first film. It is a different pace than the second film. That's because it's world building. It's all world building in that first film. And the second film just says, you know what the world's about now. Now we're going to show you the action.
Annette, I'm curious about your opinion as a producer. You've done 2 movies, and you helped save the Thurgood Marshall movie by raising the last finishing funds for that movie. Now, being a producer, what are your thoughts on the Dune franchise? As a producer, how would you approach it, and what excites you about that work?
Well, absolutely the universe building. I mean, coming from Simpsons, which really built a universe where nobody ages. It kept that franchise going for over 30 years. I am in awe of what has been accomplished with these 2 films in terms of universe building. And I think that is part of what draws in fans. What was your question, Lawrence? What would I do?
Just as a producer, how would you approach making a series like this? Like,
wow.
what would you do? That's not an easy question.
Wow, you've asked me a really tough question for a lot of people up here. How would I approach it? I mean, I think it's about the team that you pull together. I think about producing in terms of problem solving. And in order to do problem solving really well, you have to have a team of people around you with expertise in all of these different areas. Your DP, your production designer, your costumer, even the makeup people, they all have to be the very best at what they do to make that world, that universe building believable. So that's probably where I would start. I'd be going through my contacts and figuring out who do I know that would want to do this.
What are your, what particular experience working on this franchise sticks out for you? What is your highlight, so to speak?
Time. The amount of time that it took to get all this going is probably what stands out the most. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of people pulling together to get this done. My uncle, Brian Herbert, who is also the son of Frank Herbert, he also writes some Dune books. You get a chance to go out and read those, you can. My cousin, Kim Herbert, who's his daughter, we all oversee the franchise, so it's definitely a lot of work for all of us. We enjoy doing it, though. We've never not loved doing this. If we didn't love doing it, we wouldn't do it. I will say, like Annette was saying, I think one of the things you got to have is people that love the work, right? That absolutely love the work. The one thing that Denis was able to do as a director, he pulled some of the best people in the world to do this movie, right? He pulled in Greg Fraser, who did Batman, right? He pulled in Hans Zimmer, who did The Lion King and Gladiator, you know, for the music, you know. And I'm Patrice Vermette. I mean, all of these people he pulled in are the best at their business, and they all just said, "Tell us what you want, Denny, we're here for you."